This is Patrick from WSOU 89.5 FM, the loudest rock, and I'm here with Matty from Memphis May Fire. How are you doing today?
Doing awesome, man. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. So let's just get right into it. You have a new album coming out, Remade in Misery. This will be your first full-length album since you released Broken back in 2018, but you have released some singles since then. What was it like getting back into the studio to record another album after 2 years, and what drove you guys to record another full-length record?
Well, I mean, I guess like the album was really birthed out of the pandemic, right? I mean, it was that was the silver lining of the pandemic for us, was the ability to focus on writing songs as if we were kids again, because we couldn't go on tour. You know, we had no other opportunities. The pandemic shut everything down. So it all was about the music. Everything was about the songs. And the last time I remember feeling that way was making our first album, because you get busier and start to have some success, and there's so many voices in your ears and so many opportunities, and you're trying to be, 5 places at once. And this gave us the opportunity to really sit down and be like, who is Memphis May Fire? 7 full-length albums in. Who is this band? What gave us our start? What's the absolute best record that we can make for the fans that gave us a platform? And I think that we really rediscovered who we were in that moment, and made some of the greatest music I think that we've ever made.
Yeah, it sounds like some of the best music you've ever made. And now I know you said a couple times that the time off from touring caused by the pandemic made you guys get back into songwriting. You just said it made you feel like you were songwriting as kids again on your first album. How did this time off the road help your creative flow and the songwriting process on this album?
Yeah, well, like I was saying, it's so easy to be distracted. Like if someone says, here's a massive opportunity, and you know that you should be doing something else, but you can't pass it up, then the thing that really means the most, like writing records and making the best music possible, can kind of fall to the wayside a little bit. Like you go in and you make the best record you can make with the little amount of time that you have, so you can go out and chase this big tour, do this big opportunity. And it really comes down to, for us, realizing that we need to make the effort to put time aside for the things that really matter. Like to really make a record that means a lot to us, we have to be able to compartmentalize what's important and say no to some things. And the pandemic was so healthy for realizing that. We had nothing but the music, and I think because of that, made the best music we've ever made.
What were some of the things that you had to say no to? Like you just said that you were focusing on certain aspects of your sound and your creativity. What were some things you had to put aside and some things you really decided to focus on for this album?
Well, I mean, like, luckily we didn't have to say no to anything because the pandemic took everything away. Like every opportunity to tour, travel overseas, travel to write with other producers in other cities, all of that was gone. And so it just came down to Kellen and I in our home studios making a record like we did when we were younger, right? But what I meant by that was, it taught us that the importance of needing to say no to things in the future. There might be some big tour opportunity and we're in the middle of making a record, and we have to say no. We have to say, it all starts with the music. You can be on the biggest tour in the world, you can have all the radio play in the world, but if the song isn't special to you, it's not going to be special to your listeners, because they can always sense that, right? And so taking time to really make a record that is just you bleeding on paper, people know, and it's important.
And how did that mindset of putting the music first really impact the sound of this record, whether it's the sound or the lyrical content?
I think it gave us space to breathe in just rediscovering what it was that gave us our start. We've tried a lot of things over the years and grown a lot over the years, and we've done a lot of really rad stuff. And it starts to get really cloudy. You start to forget what it was like at the very beginning, and the thing that you offered to people that they're like, I have not gotten this anywhere else. And so going back and having time to dissect who we are as a band, I think it made us realize, some of the things that we've adapted over the years have been a lot of growth, and some of the things that we've adapted over the years have been not us. And it's time to kind of trim the fat. It's kind of what it felt like. You trim the fat and get back to who we really are as a band, while also incorporating some of the amazing things that we've learned over the years. And I think that's the recipe for a great record.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Now, when Blood and Water was released a while ago, all the buzz was that Memphis May Fire is returning to their heavier roots, and I definitely hear more intensity on these singles than I did on Broken. What inspired this shift back to a heavier sound? I know you already touched on it, saying you were getting back to what's important to you as a band, but in terms of the sound, what really drove you guys to make a heavier record again?
I think, the thing that we've always loved about heavy music, writing heavy music, is the live aspect, right? It's like the energy of heavy music live is unmatched by any other genre. And when you are in the middle of a pandemic and you can't be on tour and you're craving playing shows, I think you naturally just go to like, man, I want to write something that would feel so awesome live. And I think that was a driving force, missing live shows and missing touring and wanting to get back out on the road and wanting to write songs that when it was time to get back on the road would be, live anthems.
Yeah, I definitely hear a lot of that. It's funny. I actually I interviewed Ant Money from Eat Sound Concrete. They're a big Jersey-based hardcore band, and he told me that when he writes music, he actually thinks about what it would sound like live. He'd say like, "Oh, this part of the song is going to get people on their feet. This part of the song is going to get people to sing along." Do you have any of those thoughts when you're writing your music, kind of envisioning it being performed live in the songwriting process?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I think that you have to look at it from that perspective because so much of it, comes down to, is this going to make for a great live show? You can also really think about like times in the set when it's going to be time to kind of slow it down for a second and give everybody an opportunity to breathe and just feel some lyrical content in like a still motion. But it's definitely a train of thought. Anytime sing-alongs and jumping and like moshing, like all of it, it all comes to mind when you're piecing a song together.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a really unique part about heavy music, is that obviously every artist loves performing live, but the live performance is really at the root of even the songwriting process, like you said.
It,
And these singles to me sound like the best of both worlds from your last two records, The Light I Hold, which has some of your more brutal songs, like the one you said would get people jumping and moshing, whereas Broken is a little more melodic, might get people to sing along. What similarities were there in recording and writing this album and recording your previous two?
I think that by the time we actually put Broken out, we realized that, like the goal for that record, the sole intent for that record was, can we, Memphis May Fire, are we capable of making a rock record? We all love rock music. We listen to rock radio. Can we make a rock record? And, is our band a band that can be played on the radio? And we got really excited about it and went really deep into that, and then realized that in an album cycle, there's no way that you can service more than 3 songs to radio because it takes so much time for each song to be serviced to radio, right? And so we're like, why can't we have both? Why can't we make songs for radio that we love and make heavy songs that we love that our older fans are going to love? And I think that's the kind of the recipe with this record. It's like we have the songs that can go to radio that we're really stoked on, and then we have the songs that are just specifically thought about with a live mindset, right? It's like we are going to be really bringing these songs to life in a live setting, and we're really going to be bringing these songs to life in a radio setting. And I think we did both. I think we did both well. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And you've released 7 singles from the album so far. The first one, which was released in June of last year, is Blood and Water. What about this song to you makes it the ideal first taste to give your fans of your new album?
I think the heavy aspect of it, the catchiness of the chorus, I think was kind of the whole thing embodied what the rest of the record was going to taste like. Not to the full extent where we were kind of putting all of our cards on the table, but it was definitely a song that felt like, all right, we're bringing back this kind of riff, we're bringing back this kind of breakdown, we're bringing back this kind of chorus, and we want you guys to know what's coming. It's like that seemed like a really great way to open, and it was really well received. I think that it really did catch a lot of attention, which was awesome to see all these years later, right?
Yeah, totally. People were going nuts about it. And you just said how your previous record, Broken, was more driven to a rock radio type format, but with Blood and Water, I heard a lot more metalcore stuff and a lot more industrial elements in there. It almost sounded like you were recreating electronic music with real instruments. Was that the goal with this song, or were you trying to branch out into maybe a little something different?
I think the goal with the song was I think what Blood and Water really was it was everything that we've learned over the years as a band while still really channeling who we were as a young band when we first started. You know, it really is like everything heavy that people love about Memphis, everything catchy that people love about Memphis, and electronically, like programming wise, you know, Kellen's brilliant and has been doing that stuff for years, and I think he's just gotten better and better at it. So when you hear that like electronic element, it's just him being creative in the background, you know?
Yeah, I definitely hear that. So in addition to Blood and Water at SOU, we've also been playing Left for Dead and Death Inside. These songs definitely go back to what we talked about before. They have the groove and intensity that you talked about when writing music for live shows, but they are also very melodic and musical for people to sing along to. So first I want to talk about Death Inside, which is probably my personal favorite of all the
Awesome.
singles. What was the inspiration behind this song and the songwriting process?
I mean, I really wanted to try something different with my voice on that song. I feel like the only way that a lyric can be communicated properly is if it's paired with the right melody or rhythm. And that verse and the way that it needed to be communicated, I felt like needed this like spitty, yelly, kind of like angry tone that wouldn't be screaming and it wouldn't be singing and it wouldn't be rap. It was none of it. Like it was just this, you know, like kind of angry, like talk. It's the weirdest thing, but when I did it, like when it came out of my body, I was like, that's it. That's the tone that we're going to use to communicate this. And we've got another song that hasn't been released yet that has kind of that same tone to it. And it's just like, it felt experimental and fun and cool. And then the chorus didn't seem like it felt like unexpected by the time you got to the chorus, which was also really exciting to me, just like something that people wouldn't necessarily think was going to happen next. So yeah, man, I'm really stoked about how that one turned out. And I don't think it's not been one that like everybody has gravitated towards. So when people do, I'm always like, all right, you get it. You see what I was trying to do. And that's awesome.
So you just mentioned how you tried to put something unexpected in the chorus after a lot of intensity in the verse. And I think that's something that really drives a lot of people to metalcore as a genre. Is that your typical songwriting formula? I know not every song is written the same, but is that a sort of goal you try to strive for? Because I definitely hear it a lot on a lot of these songs.
Yeah, I think that the element of surprise in a chorus is really important. It's also really important for everything to feel cohesive. Like it can't be, I mean, I guess it could if you wanted it to, but it can't be like so jarring that it's distasteful. You know, it has to be like, oh, wow, I didn't expect that, but I love that that's happening. And yeah, that's a goal. I think you want to keep the listener intrigued and keep them hungry and wanting more.
Yeah, and I definitely hear that on Death Inside. Now, on Left for Dead, it has a little more groove and more electronic elements to it, but it's just as heavy as the other singles, I think. What went into writing this song and producing it, since you definitely hear a lot of moving parts? There's the vocal melody, there's the grooves, and there's the electronic elements and the guitar riffs and all that.
Yeah, on this one, I wrote the vocals with my buddy Cody from Wage War, and we just had a killer time writing together on that one. We got the instrumental from Kellen, guitars, bass, drums, fully finished as like, you know, from start to finish a fully finished instrumental song, right? And we just sat down, we're like, how does this make us feel, you know? And it's the one kind of like breakup song on the record, and so it just felt right to get really gritty, to get really angry in the verses, and then just to bring it home in the chorus. And yeah, man, I feel like that one, even like the way it starts off and everything, is gonna be a crazy time live.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. Now, you just said you got the instrumental from Kellen and you wrote the lyrics with Cody from Wage War. Is that how a lot of your songs are made, where it's the instrumental comes first and you decide how you feel about it, or is that not always the
As
case?
long as we've been a band, man, I mean, we're talking 15 years. Kellen has always just delivered fully finished instrumentals, and it wasn't premeditated to be that way. It's just that, you know, when I joined the band, it was, you know, they had a different singer for about a year beforehand, and then they ended up doing open auditions on MySpace. This was forever ago, right? The way that they did their open auditions was they uploaded an instrumental of one of their new songs to MySpace, where you could download it, and then you would write something over it and then send it back as like an audition. And so when I got picked to join the band, that's how I understood the process of how things were going to work. I was going to get a song from Kellen, I was going to write over it and then give it back, and that's always been what we've done, always.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. So you said your audition for the band was on MySpace over a pre-recorded instrumental track. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, so they uploaded an unfinished song, a finished instrumental from that didn't have any vocals on it from the record that they were about to do, and just said write and record something over this and then send it back to us. And I think they got like 180 of them. It was crazy, and I did it. I had a ton of fun with it and sent it back, and the rest is history, dude.
That's so punk. I love it. So
Yeah.
what would you say are your guys' biggest musical influences, and how do you think they come across in the songwriting and the sound of this record?
I think anytime that somebody has like referenced Kellen's like southern tones and twangs in the way that he writes riffs, they're probably referencing just his love for like Stone Temple Pilots and I mean, some of the older, the Showdown, Mailing, like those bands were so rad. For me, like I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. This Tooth and Nail Solid State era was a huge deal up there, especially, I mean, everywhere, but a huge deal up there because that's where they're from. And so, I grew up going to shows like that. And I think that probably plays a big role in, my vocal techniques. I grew up absolutely obsessed with a band called Blindside. Their singer, his ability to seamlessly go in and out of singing and screaming, I always aspired to be able to do that. And so yeah, I think that the kind of like the earlier influences is probably what shaped us more than today's music, but we're obviously all influenced by what's around us, a product of our environment for sure. So yeah.
Yeah, sounds really cool. How would you guys say you influence each other when you're writing music and producing it?
I think that with most bands going into a room and creating songs together, there might be a lot of that. In our band, there's really not. It's Kellen has always written instrumentals start to finish, and we've rarely ever touched them. I mean, maybe a little bit of like rearrangement, but he's such a genius with the way that he writes that by the time we get something, it's already like, you're like, wow, should I even put vocals over this? It's so awesome. And then me writing on my own or with whatever co-writer I choose to work with or whatever, like Kellen has not ever gotten super involved with the vocal stuff either. And so we've been kind of just individuals in our own right coming together and making this, this recipe that's, I think it's probably a little different than how bands do it.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely way different. And I remember when the pandemic hit, so many bands were totally blindsided because all they know is being in person. But for you guys, you were pretty much pros at it at that point. Do you think that influenced the recording of this record and the songwriting process behind it?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I didn't plan to do vocals in my studio, but we did. I mean, every single vocal that you hear on that record was recorded in this studio. And it was awesome. Like we weren't affected by that at all. Like the fact that we couldn't meet up with each other because we never would have otherwise. So yeah, super cool.
Yeah, very cool. So what are you most excited about with the release of Remade in Misery?
I think it's been such a different type of rollout for us, putting out a song every month over the last like 8 or 9 months and letting people hear so much of the record before it's out that it's actually really exciting. By the time the record comes out, it's not going to be about first week numbers. It's not going to be about the in like blast of hype from putting a record out. It's going to be, hey, now here's everything you've heard packaged together in the way that it was meant to be heard. Listen to it start to finish if you want, or keep listening to the singles. But by now, most of the songs. We'll see you on the road singing along every word. That's been kind of the goal all along. And it's we don't have to wait and take time for people to get used to them, to tell us what their favorite songs are. They're kind of going to already know. And there will be a couple treats on there for sure when it comes out. But yeah, it's been such a wild ride of a different way to release a record. And I think it's actually, there's less anxiety with it, like by the time it actually happens, it's like, our record is out. Do you like it? And it's either a yes or a no, so pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely a different way of putting out an album, but you have Remade in Misery. Do we have a date? I saw a few dates online, but I don't want to speculate.
Yeah, June 3rd.
So Remade in Misery out June 3rd. Make sure you check it out. You already have the 7 singles that have been released so far. We've been playing Left for Dead, Death Inside, and Blood and Water on SOU so far, but you can check out the other 4 singles on Spotify, Apple Music, I'm assuming, right?
Yep, anywhere, man.
All right, fantastic. Matty, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, thank you for anybody that's listened to, that's anybody that's enjoyed a song. Come out and see us on tour with Dance Gavin Dance next month. And then we'll be announcing more touring plans shortly after.
All right, Matty, thanks a lot for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, brother. Appreciate it.
This is Patrick from WSOU 89.5.